So, good morning, everyone. Um, I wanted to make sure that with all the changes that have happened with, supervision and all of that, um, I just want to make sure we talk through this real quick. Um, they have made it so that an OCPS, which is what all of you are going to be when you pass the test, um, can be a lot more independent because really that's the national accreditation. Um, so once you become an OCPS, you will not need supervision and you can provide supervision. Now, that being said, if you have your sights set on an OCPC, so the requirements there, you have to have a bachelor's or higher. But if you have your sights set on that, you still have to have supervision to get the experience that you would need for that. I don't want you to, come 2 years down the road and say, oh, now I've got all my stuff. I want to apply for the C and you haven't had supervision. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that. Um, you know, it's a subtlety that they don't explain well. So any questions on that? Shannon has one. She's
Couldn't
trying to find the
get over
unmute.
yeah, I couldn't get over there. So run me through who can an OCPSA supervise?
An A?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Okay. Not even somebody with an RA?
Nope.
Okay. What about does the I have my master's in social work. Does that still qualify for supervising some parts of
Do
staff
you
with
have an
RA?
do you have an LSW?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me show you guys real quick and I can give you a link for this. Copy,
Is this like
paste.
newly updated from?
Yeah, I'm going to show you
Okay.
the actual Ohio Administrative Code here.
Okay.
That's what that link is to.
Okay.
So let's say, so going for the A, which all of you probably are an A, um, you can do all of these things as long as you are supervised by someone. Um, all of these things while you're supervised by someone here, um, but not as an independent practitioner. And none of these talk about you supervising someone else. Now, you asked about who can supervise an A. If someone is doing information dissemination, prevention, education, communication, alternatives, or problem ID and referral, the majority of things that you are doing, then an LSW, licensed social worker, can supervise them. If they start doing things like community evaluations, like uh, community readiness surveys,
Mm-hmm.
if they want to run a coalition, if they want to do policy work or train other prevention professionals,
Mm-hmm.
then they have to have either a C, an
Mm-hmm.
S, or a CHES.
Okay.
Clear as mud.
Yeah. It's like a if then. So what about LPC? I see that they're st will they stay on there?
Probably not for much
Okay.
longer.
Okay. I understand.
Um, and I know I am being recorded, but from what I've been told is that was an accident that they left them there. They
Okay.
didn't mean to. Because they did take them off the RA,
Okay.
but they are here.
Okay.
So as far as, they have to follow what they have in the law right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Thank
But
you.
I would not hang my hat on that if I
Okay.
were someone. Any other questions about that? So just when you get your S, you can do all of these things and all of these things, no supervision needed. and you can supervise all of these. However, if you did um, planning and evaluation, again, like big community-wide readiness surveys or something like that, or if you manage prevention programs, which that's the thing you would need to be able to get your C, then you do have to be supervised by a C or a CHES. So that's why I'm saying if you, when you become a S and if you have your sights set on a C, keep some kind of supervision. Make sense? All right. So last week we kind of talked about some of the overview of the CADCA primers and just kind of the basics. Today we are actually starting on assessment and capacity, which are the first two steps of the what?
At the spiff, right?
Absolutely, you got
Yeah.
it. Gold star. Yeah. So assessment and capacity, each one of the steps of the spiff has a CADCA primer. So we're going to do them in order, just so it makes a little bit more sense. Um, all right. So let's start off with this. Of course, I told you, you got to be able to eat, breathe, and sleep the spiff. Um, so starting off with the spiff, again, starting at the assess the needs. This is where you collect the data, define the problem, resources, readiness. What does readiness mean again?
Like, is the community aware of the problem that they have and
And
how
ready
ready
to
are
help.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I've seen lots of sample questions about readiness. So just understand what it is. You don't have to like know real deep into it, but um, so that's what we're doing here. This is a lot of data collection. And when you read through the CADCA primers, they talk a lot about using coalitions and all the members of a coalition to help collect this data because it's a lot, or it can be a lot, I should say. So the specific steps define and describe the community. They talk a lot about how we want to let the community define itself. What would that mean? Y'all thought you were going to wake up this morning and not have to do any work.
I would say like surveys, focus groups, do a lot of interviews with community members to am I on the right track or
Well, that is something we want to do. When we want them to define and describe the community, we want the community to say who they are.
okay.
Because if I live in Warren County, and if I go to someone in Mason, I might say, what does your community look like? And they might say Mason Deerfield Township, because that's all the same school district. We're all pretty much the same. Um, but they might also say, you know what? I see all of Warren County as our community. Or they might say, I see Mason Westchester as part of the community. So letting the community define what they see as their community. Because sometimes boundaries matter and sometimes they don't. I do a lot of shopping and my church is in Westchester. And so I go over to Westchester a lot. So I kind of see Westchester Mason as one community. So letting the community define who they want to be community with. Collecting your needs and resource data. So that's kind of what Shannon was talking about, getting all that data of what what do people need in this community? So now that we know what the community looks like, then we can figure out what the needs are, what the resources are in our community. Um, I mean, it's almost like you start making lists. You can also do what they call a resource map, which is you literally have a map of the community. Say, okay, here's a YMCA, and here's a library, and here's a school. Um, just kind of to help get your brain around what it is. Then you can, as you're figuring out what your needs are, you can conduct a problem analysis for each substance. Now, when you read through these steps, they talk about creating a logic model for each substance, which means you might have 7 different logic models. I've never heard anybody say that that's a good idea. One, maybe 2, but just know that they kind of talk about, doing it all. I guess they expect us all to be all things to all people. I don't. But conducting a problem analysis for each substance. So if you have found that vaping is really high in your community, what do we know about that? Why is that a problem? Who is that impacting? Um, what kind of things have been done before? So just kind of looking into that substance, then creating a logic model for that. And then obviously you want to update that assessment because again, the SPIF is this circular thing. So date that substance or that assessment. They say generally about every 2 to 3 years, uh, but it's a lot of work. So, as funding can allow, I guess. All right. So this is one that they pulled this. They said there's something from this page specifically. So when we're talking about assessment, they use the term community assessment work group. Have a feeling that knowing that term is what you need to know for the test question that they got here. Basically, this is just saying that there's maybe a subgroup of a coalition or a subgroup in your agency that is going to specifically look at assessment data. So if you see a question that says community assessment work group, just know that that's a small subset of the big group, small subset that is just working on assessment data. So this group would collect, analyze, and report on the data. Again, it's always good to have someone from your public health department there because they have a lot of data. They talk about, law enforcement, schools, public health, social services, a treatment, coalition staff, maybe an outside researcher or epidemiologist, because again, we all have tons of money, right? Some of the things that this community assessment work group might also do is work on the evaluation process, reporting to the community in general, and then specific indicators on which the coalition is working. So, it might be the community assessment work group that looked into vaping as our issue, and maybe they're the ones that have all the data on that. So you, me, and everyone else knows that a lot of times that comes back on the staff. But remember that they're always talking about in a perfect world. So in a perfect world, that would be the community assessment work group. Make sense? All right. Have we looked at this tree before? I've this is my 13th group and I can never remember what I've already done and what I haven't. Okay. Again, this is on page 41 of this primer. This is one that's pulled out. So what this whole thing is talking about how we take the data and really drill down to what the risk and protective and underlying problem is. So let's say that we have looked at bunches of data and these are some things that the branches, these are some things that have kind of bubbled up. So we know that there's a lot of school performance problems. We've seen a lot of DUI injuries and deaths. We've seen a lot of youth violence. We've seen a lot of sexual activity in teen pregnancy. All of those things are things that we kind of see when we do our data. It comes together then, and looking at all of these, we realize, you know what the underlying thing is for all of these? Underage drinking. Then we need to look at what does the data say in our community for underage drinking. So this is some of those data points. Then we look at the why. Why is that a problem here? So the what, the why, and the why here. So we're going to look a little bit closer on each one of these pieces, but I just wanted to show you the kind of the overall. So starting off with these here. You have done your assessment, you've pulled all your data together, you sat in a room for 3 hours and looked it over and saw these 4 things that have kind of come up. And you look at each one of these, you go, you know what? There's been drinking involved in a lot of these. So underage drinking is kind of what I'm seeing as a problem. Then you go back and say, okay, what's the underage drinking statistics? And that's where they then pulled out these statistics. So you're starting to get the picture of what it looks like in your community, the what, the why. Now we need to all of these things. Sorry, I didn't realize I had all my things coming up. Now we need to think, okay, what is our problem statement? So from that, you could say underage drinking is a problem in X community, as evidenced by 58% of 12th graders reporting having had alcohol in the last 30 days, in contrast to the national average of 16% and the state average of 30%. It's always good to kind of say, why is this a big deal? If you said underage drinking is a problem because we had 12% of 12th graders, well, it's not really, I mean, it's a problem, but it's not maybe one of your biggest problems because it's nothing different from the national and state. So now we've kind of got our problem statement. But is there anything missing from this problem statement? What questions might you have if you saw this? And it's a hard question. So it's okay if you don't know. Does it tell you why this is happening in this community? It really doesn't. I mean, it tells us what is happening, but there's not the really why. So if we look back, we can see the problems that are happening and what is happening that caused that, but we don't know why. Why are these kids drinking? And so much more than the state and national average. So that's where you bring in these root causes. So these are some things maybe that you have picked up in your data collection. Maybe merchants aren't carding people and they're just selling alcohol to minors. Maybe you've got bars. I won't talk about any colleges around here, but the college that I went to in Florida, they didn't care what kind of ID you had. They would accept whatever ID, and this was 30 years ago. So maybe you've got bars that are accepting fake IDs. Maybe it's because you've got kids who are saying, "Oh, we all know this big brother who will buy it for us." Or maybe it's just really readily available. So we all know that a lot of people, I am not one of them, but we'll have like a beer fridge in the garage, right? Well, you may not realize this, but in Florida, not many people have garages. They have carports. So just, an open air thing. but they still have fridges out there. So easy to for anybody to get in and get it, right? So that may be the availability piece. Maybe it's that parents just don't care and they just approve of their kids drinking. Maybe it's because teens are like, it's not that big of a deal. My parents do it, everyone does it. That's just what you do. Um, Maybe the parents think that if we watch them and then we keep them at home, that's going to stop DUIs. Or maybe it's because people just say, you know what, I did it when I was a kid. Everyone's just going to do it. It's not a big deal. Now, I want you to think for a second. Let's go back to our problem. So, our problem is the high number of 12th graders reporting having had alcohol in the last 30 days. Looking at all of these root causes, think about the differences in the way you would approach them. If we decided that we're going to look at the merchants not carding, what might be a strategy that we might put into place to reduce that underage drinking?
Compliance checks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What if we decided we want to impact parental approval? What might we do?
Maybe provide education to the parents
Yeah,
about the
exactly.
harms. Yeah.
Um, yeah, exactly. So when we're talking test questions, there's probably going to be some questions that talk about here's the root cause. What would be an appropriate strategy? So parental education is always a good strategy, right? But if our root cause is 1 in 5 merchants not carding, does that match up? This is where some really smart people get caught up in some of these questions because they think too much into it. You have to just look at the question face value. So if the question says 32% of you say friends, older friends buy it, talking about compliance checks with merchants might not be the best strategy for that. So make sure that you're really thinking and looking at, the match between those. So let's say we're going to pick that parents believe supervised use will prevent DUIs. So it might look like this. Your problem statement is underage drinking is a problem in X county as evidenced by 52% of 12th graders reporting having had alcohol in the last 30 days in contrast to the national average of 16%, the state average of 30%. But why? Why is because 84% of X county parents believe that supervised use of alcohol by teens will prevent DUI. Then we go to the but why here? And that's where we really then dig down as to why is that a problem? Well, maybe because they don't know how to talk to their kids about healthy decisions. So now we really, really have a good place to start from our intervention, right? We know specifically the kind of education that we need to give the parents. So the problem statement, the but why, and the but why here is important so that we can use the intervention and strategy that's going to most directly impact this problem. Does that make sense? So this is why this or how this tree comes into play. Just want to make sure everyone understood that. Because when you first look at it, it's like, what in the world does that mean? So I know sometimes, yes, Shannon,
So when you say page 41, is that in the book that you gave us, or is that in the CATCA primer book?
that's in the CATCA Primer Community Assessment booklet.
And
That's
how
in
do
the
we obtain that?
that's in the folder.
Okay,
So the
okay,
Google folder. You can also just, look it up online, but
okay,
when you get to the Google folder, that would be in here. So when you get here, and it's okay, we'll take a second here.
okay.
You get to page 41. Look at that. There it is. So I'm just saying, just make sure. I like to put the actual picture in the slides and when we talk about it so that when you go back to the booklet, you can say, oh, yeah, that's exactly what she was talking about. All right. So sometimes our words can seem different, or we can say, well, that's not the word I thought they were gonna use. So just this page here, and this is the actual chart from the booklet, from the community assessment booklet. They may interchange some of these words. So data may also be like what information, what kind of measure, what kind of indicators or data points. So if they use those words, it's basically the same thing. Your root cause, those roots down at the bottom they might say risk and protective factor. I don't hear resiliency factor very much, but contributing factor, intervening variable, hear that one a lot, or causal factor. This is where I want you to just not even look at this objective outcome goal aim targets. Don't even look at that one. Just ignore that one. Because that gets way too confusing because they are not similar. And then your strategy or what you're going to do, that might be your program, your activity, your action, your initiative, your policy. That's what you're going to do. So again, when we talked about, parent programs or parent education, that's the strategy. Questions about assessment. That's just a lot of data stuff. Let's get into the capacity primer. So that's our next one. And again, they overlap because we know that you might be doing a little bit of the needs assessment while you're starting to build that capacity. Capacity is where you mobilize and or build capacity within a geographic area to address the needs. So just since we're in this group, just so you know, just got an email, literally just came through, of someone who just passed her exam. Woohoo! So always kind of exciting to hear when people have passed. All right, so figuring out what the capacity is. This might be things like your coalition membership. I've worked with lots of people and they're like, all we really did was get people together. That's huge. If you've never in your community had people all in the same room and all of a sudden you now have people who all come together, that's big. That is building capacity. Now, again, as we go through the spiff, maybe the next time around we want to do a little bit more. But even just building capacity in a coalition or in a group is huge. Developing your coalition structure. Now, you will notice, again, whenever they talk about things, it's really coalition heavy. So let's say we've already gone through this build capacity may also be, our teachers, we want to put the incredible years, just since Shannon brought that up earlier, we want to put the incredible years in all the schools. So we need to have some people trained in teaching the incredible years. That would be building capacity. Or we need to buy all of the puppets and curriculum. That would be building capacity. Or we need to go to a thrift store and get the 4T clothes that fit Wally and Molly. That would be building capacity. I have a feeling there's probably still some of my kids' old clothes being put on Molly and Wally in Butler County. So no, but that would be kind of funny. Um, Cultivating leadership. So when you are talking about your coalition, you want to, have some people step up as leaders, whether it's leaders for a small subgroup like your community data work group or for the whole coalition. And then training opportunities. Training coalitions is huge too. You guys need to make sure that your coalitions even know what the heck they are. Because sometimes coalitions like, why are we here again? What did we do? Um, we didn't do this last time, but what are some things that might impact capacity having to do with sustainability?
Could it be like funding or ongoing like costs of, like I was thinking like incredible years, like that there are ongoing needs year to year that required expenses.
And how could building capacity meet that need?
Um,
I mean, you're right. That is something we have to think about.
like grants or determining like picking a different, like the example is probably way too specific, like the vignettes that we do for Incredible Years. You can use the DVDs, which is old school, but once you have them, they're in place, or you could purchase the streaming, which is convenient and more up to date, but it requires a yearly fee.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like sometimes, like, if you don't have a continued funding source or a grant that may end, then you would no longer have those unless if you had like them on. I know that's a super small example, but that's what came to
No,
mind.
no, I think that's great. So building capacity could then be maybe you've got a business person who's like, I could give you the $150 or whatever Incredible Years is charging for it a year and just write that off my taxes. But if you didn't have that capacity, that group of people, you might not have
Mm-hmm.
the ability to do that.
Right.
Or, and I know we can't do this for Incredible Years, but let's just say we wanted to redo the videos with people in our community. You could have your media person, maybe is a good person to do that. So making sure that you've got that strong and broad base group helps with sustainability because you've got many more people to pull from for resources, not just financial, but maybe brain power too. What would be some things to think about with cultural competence and capacity? What do you have to think about when you're bringing these people together that would have to do with cultural competency? First, you have to think about making sure we include all parts of the community, right? We'll talk later on about some of those hidden communities. when we have our community define who and what they consider a community, we need to make sure that all parts of that community are part of our efforts. And then also making sure that we are reaching all parts of our community. All right, so the way that the DFC would have you do it would be making sure you've got somebody from all of these different sectors. Is anybody on here with a DFC? I will tell you they love the DFC, which makes me a little anxious because there's some possibility for some funding cuts there. But there might be questions that just say DFC, so you know that that's the Drug-Free Communities Grant. And one of the things that the Drug-Free Communities Grant talks about is that it is required you have somebody from these 12 sectors. The reason is that the more diverse group you have, the more likely you are going to have, say, sustainability and cultural competence, right? So you don't need to be able to write these down in a list, because I even forget a couple sometimes. But understanding that there needs to be a diverse group, and that particularly for people like youth, it's not that they're just a token youth on there. They are a member of the coalition. So another piece that they kind of talk about is developing your culture, your structure of your coalition. Members would be people who are participating. So that's all of these people are members of the coalition. Staff might be people who work at an agency that are kind of helping run the coalition. But it's not, the staff should not be the whole coalition. So if you are in agency ABC, the whole coalition should not be ABC staff members. Here's another one that was called out on the page here. So this is about identifying training opportunities, and specifically training for within your coalition. So how smoothly is our coalition functioning internally? So sometimes you have to do training to teach a coalition how to be a coalition. So finding out who has what skills and expertise. Maybe you've got someone who's really good at note taking. Hey, guess what? Can you be the secretary? Maybe you have someone who is always on time and likes to keep time. Oh, could you be our timekeeper? Maybe you have nobody who really wants to step up to be the president, the head, chairperson, whatever you want to call it. So maybe we need to offer some training to that person. Are members excited and actively engaged in the coalition work? So are they, do they see the vision? And if not, then that's where some education might need to take place. Are our meetings efficient and task oriented, or could this have been a silly email? Making sure that whoever's running the meeting knows how to run a meeting. Is it easy for members to communicate with each other and maintain momentum between coalition meetings? This is, where we use technology of, whether it's I don't even know all the really cool stuff that could be out there now, but like, a group me, or some other kind of way to quickly and easily communicate with each other. This is a big one. Is the work of the coalition distributed among members and teams effectively? You know, is the staff person the one that's doing most of the work, and therefore not necessarily would not, that wouldn't be culturally competent because the staff person doesn't know everything. None of us know everything about everything. Are the coalition leaders keeping our coalition work on track? And are the coalition meeting settings where diversity is respected, conflict is managed, and group synergy is created? So looking at these things, saying, do we need to educate anybody in the coalition on this? So there could be a question that says, you have noticed that one person in your coalition takes really good notes and loves to organize them. How could you use this skill in a position in a coalition? I mean, it's not going to be, too intense. But then you might say the answer, and one of the answers might be ask them if they'd like to be the secretary. The other way to identify some training needs is think about how strong is our coalition's external connections within the community. So we want the coalition together to be strong, but we want also those people in the coalition to take the information back to the community and bring information in from the community. So does our coalition have strategies in place to get its work known in the larger community? This is one of the things we're not usually pretty good at. We're not good at telling the community all the great stuff we do. Is your coalition able to identify and bring in additional partners or sectors as needed? Like, if we need someone who can do, I don't know, be an MC, does somebody in the coalition know people? Or do we need to bring in some more people so that we have a bigger pool? And does your coalition make sure that proposed community strategies are culturally competent? So again, that's in every step, we need to think about that. So we're going to watch a video that talks about the 7 strategies for community change, which is one of the things that CADCA puts out. This actually is from Ohio. So just watch the video, and then we're going to go through each one of the stages, or each one of the steps, and really dig into it so that you can understand it. But I want you to just watch the video. Don't worry about taking notes or anything like that. I mean, you can if you want to, I guess.
Southern Ohio's Scioto County became the epicenter of a nation's growing opioid crisis in the early 2000s. Scioto County attained the highest opioid prescription rate in the state. More than 9.5 million painkiller doses were dispensed in 2010, or more than 120 pills per citizen. The Ohio Department of Public Health brought together Scioto County officials, health departments, and other sector representatives affected by the opioid epidemic to develop a solution for this problem. 2 county health departments encouraged partnerships among local stakeholders, leading to the formation of a community coalition focused on both curtailing the current crisis and preventing youth initiation into non-medical opioid use. The newly formed Scioto County Drug Action Team Alliance participated in CADCA's National Coalition Academy training, where coalition leaders learned about local data collection, collaborative planning, and the development of comprehensive strategies to address substance misuse. Framed by the 7 strategies for community change, the coalition's activities targeted individuals as well as the whole community.
In our county, we can actually see live how many people have presented to the emergency department on a drug-related issue, and that helps us to identify, if we're having a spike in overdoses and if we're seeing improvements and things like that. We recruited within our school systems a person in each school system that would be that youth-led prevention leader in that school system. Really expanded access to naloxone, and I feel pretty good about that because naloxone is really just sort of a household word, very, very normal in our county, and people aren't afraid to use it. began to expand our addiction treatment facilities. We definitely ramped up access to medication-assisted treatment. We got new providers. We've done trainings with new providers so that we could expand that workforce. And we also began to really expand our prevention. We were also able to get it to the law changed to where you didn't have to be a physician to hand that naloxone to someone. Now anyone can do that as long as you're trained. So that helped a lot. It wasn't necessarily feasible to expect a doctor to go with you every place to these outreach events. So we have that change now. We were actually the first county in the nation to declare a public health emergency over prescription opioids. And at the time, that seemed a little odd, certainly based on the phone calls I got from all over the Associated Press and everybody calling. But, you know, now here we are 8 years later, and we have a national public health emergency related to prescription opioids. So we were just really kind of the canaries in the coal mine in Appalachia in terms of the devastating effects of these drugs. Well, the thing that I learned at the National Academy and the strategies that we learned and the tools that we made there really kind of helped me to hone in on specific data and think very strategically about how to address that problem. Looking at root causes in the community, looking at the big picture. We've had reductions in past 30-day use of alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, and the largest decrease we had was in the non-medical use of prescription drugs. We also had reductions across the board in all of the other categories of drugs. And so, we feel like we really did a good job with our youth. Our adolescent prescription, non-medical use of prescription drug rates are actually below the national average. Our prescription drug-related fatalities have declined. We have also seen our hepatitis C rates decline, and we comprehensively address all of those things through other avenues. In coalitions, you're not dealing with just this person or just this set of people. You're dealing with the environment, the entire environment where these people live and how they interact.
All right, so let's look through those strategies. We heard about them last time. We're going to look through them again. Whoops, stop. So the first one was provide information. So again, this is kind of like information dissemination. It's just giving information out. So they got their data together and used that information just to let people know about it, start a prescription monitoring program, just some basic finding out the information. Then they decided we need to look at enhancing skills. That's where they did the Start Talking initiative, talking about parents and young people talking. They did the Youth-Led Prevention initiative in 8 different school districts. So again, educating, enhancing those skills. They did the Youth-Led Prevention training and the drug-free workplace training. So they were enhancing the skills of the people around to make sure that they understood what was going on and then how to help prevent it. Next, they did the provide support. This is where they had the naloxone education and distribution program. So supporting people who may have experienced a problem with an overdose, conducted that countywide education campaign on overdose prevention. So, when naloxone Narcan first came out, people were like, I don't know what this is. I don't think I'm qualified to do this. So they did the countywide education on how to do that. And then they trained the first responders, law enforcement, and fire departments to use it. Next, the strategy was enhance access and reduce barriers. So to enhance access, they expanded treatment facilities and access to the medicated assisted treatment. They got new providers who could help reduce the barrier of not having enough people to do the services, and amplified those prevention efforts, which again is enhancing that access. Strategy 5 is changing the consequences. So they did this through some policy change that allowed for regular citizens in the community to possess and administer naloxone. So the consequence was, in the past, you know, only if you had an ambulance there or a police officer there could someone give naloxone. So the consequences might have been that somebody might not have come out of that overdose. But because they were able to get legislation that allowed for regular citizens, that way the consequences of an overdose were changed, and the consequences of having the medication, the naloxone, and not being in trouble for having it was changed. That consequence was changed. Changing the physical design. Now, this one, I don't want to call it a stretch, but they became they got their drug-free communities grant and a designation as a high-intensity drug trafficking area. So that's kind of changing the metaphysical design. But it does do some things like open you up for more funding and allow some things to kind of snowball from there. And then finally, the modify change policies. They had their coalition members attend the CADCA Academy. Has anybody in here ever been to CADCA, either the mid-year or the summer one? If you get a chance, I strongly encourage you to go to one. I really enjoyed it. I went to the one in February of 2020, right before the world shut down. But it's really cool because if you go to the one in February-ish, sometimes it's the end of January, beginning of February, you get to go up onto Capitol Hill and talk to your representatives. And that is a really cool experience, because our work is not something a lot of people know about. So I encourage people to do it. But they changed their policies in their community, those like little P policy, that the coalition leaders would go to the CADCA Academy. So again, these are the 7 steps of program. Oh, sorry. No. So those are the 7 strategies. They love lists. So this next one is another different list. But any questions about those strategies? Because again, it's not that you're going to have to list them out, but understanding, yeah, I can make sure that I can put this in again. Each email from this point forward will have all of the links. So there's the link to the Google folder. All right. 7 steps of program planning. So we're in the capacity, but we're kind of in this where it turns from capacity into planning piece. This is, you have to understand what you have and where you want to go before you could start planning it. So that's kind of where we are here. Assess readiness in the community and mobilize. So think about, we got the readiness information from the assessing needs. We created that capacity. Now we take that information, and before we really start planning, we have to analyze it. What is our readiness? What does that look like? Assessing levels of risk and protective factors. So all of this we have to do before we really start planning. Translate the risk and protective factors data into priorities. So again, you might say that, you know, retailers giving kids alcohol is your priority. So figuring out what your priority is. Examining the resources in the community. Selecting your target population. Are we going to look at the retailers, the parents, the kids? All of that's based on back here, the kind of the but why stuff. Apply best practices and guiding principles. In other words, not just, oh, I heard my cousin has this new program you'd like to try out. And then evaluation. So, coming back to evaluation always. I just wanted to put this out there. Don't stress about this part at all. Here are some things to not stress about, but to really think about. Validated archival data. What is an archival indicator or archival data? What does that mean? Anybody know?
Something that was like previously collected.
Absolutely. So yes, any data points that were collected prior to the beginning of the research study or of the time that you're doing it. So what do you have to do to get archival data?
Would the library be a good place to start?
Yeah, you can go to the library. You do research, right? Wherever that research might be. So that's a little different than going out and surveying the community. So we're looking at stuff that was already there, and this is going to be important, as you can see. So some things about, or some information about validated archival indicators. You can find out availability. So maybe, well, you can think about before COVID. So like in 2019, we know the availability for vapes was really high, right? But then COVID hit and it was really difficult for young people to get it because they didn't have that connection to their friends. So availability can be an archival indicator that you can look back on. Some community laws and norms. What was the law like? Well, we talk sometimes about prohibition. What were some of the lessons learned there? Transitions and mobility. Do we have a lot of transitions in our community? Do we have a lot of migrant workers that come in and, it might change the landscape at different times of the year? Is there a lot of community disorganization? Do our communities, are they working together really well, or is it really hard for us to reach across those borders? Extreme economic and social deprivation. So are we having, did a big employer just leave and now a lot of people out of work? And we know that the social deprivation happened a lot during COVID, right? We just weren't able to connect with people. Family management problems. Sometimes that's an issue, or family conflict. We know that there are some communities that really have favorable attitudes and involvement as far as alcohol is concerned. Maybe there's a low commitment to the schools. Maybe it's because, they've lost a lot of levies, and so there's not a lot of money there. Maybe it's because it's not a good school, and so people don't feel committed to it, whatever that might be. early and persistent antisocial behavior. So if you've got data that says, consistently our young people's first drink of alcohol is at 9, where national average is 12, that might be something to look into. Academic failure beginning in late elementary school. So you've got a lot of kids who are repeating 4th grade. Alienation and rebelliousness. How would you find that information? Just go around and find kids sitting on the side of the street with tattoos and beers. Maybe juvenile court records. You could look at records from the school of, number of times kids are sent to the office. Friends who engage in problem behavior. So again, you can look at old data for that. Favorable attitudes towards the problem behavior. So looking over time, what has our data shown that kids think about it? And then early initiation of the problem behavior. So these are all things that any of us can go find that data. It's some people might say it's a little hard, but it's because you're not looking in the right place. Knowing where to look makes it pretty easy to find a lot of this data. So we're going to look at some practice questions. A needs assessment that uses information collected from interviews, focus groups, and/or observations involving document reviews to produce a descriptive report is called. So what are some words in that help you kind of figure out what this question is asking?
The type of assessment that was used, like interviews, observations, wasn't necessarily like numbers or.
Okay. So the fact that there's interviews, focus groups, observations. Anything else that you would want to hone in on? Maybe a descriptive report. So before we look at the options, anybody have any kind of idea what uh, what this descriptive report might be, or a word that might have something to do with it? And it's okay if you don't know, because not all of them you're gonna. Okay, so Caitlin says qualitative. Because so we know qualitative has to do with words and descriptions and that kind of thing. So let's see if that's an option. If not, we can go back to the drawing board. Well, look at that. But don't do like Jennifer does. Make sure you read all of them first. So qualitative data is one of the options. Outcome data, quantitative data, or indicator data. So looking at these and going back to our question, do we think it's qualitative data? Yeah, it is. What would outcome data be? Might be something like the outcome of this was that 52% of kids stated that they would, it could be, 52% of kids stated they will make different choices with drugs and alcohol. As opposed to the impact data, which I know it's not on here, but an impact data would be 10 years from now, we see that the number of kids who have problems with drugs and alcohol is reduced. Quantitative data is those numbers. Well, they didn't talk anything about numbers here, so that's why we know it's not that one. Indicator data. Does anybody know what that would be? That one's a little more funky. You don't, oops, sorry. You don't see that term very often. That would be like, maybe an indicator is that 32 kids got caught with a vape at school. And so we want to change that actual indicator to now we only have 26 kids, whatever that might be. All right, any questions on this question? I know it's silly that we're kind of going into this so deeply, but doing this, it's going to be more important to know how to answer a question than what the actual question is. All right, the most important feature in creating a logic model is, so what are just some features of a logic model? What are some things that are in a logic model? Got your inputs, you got your outputs. So inputs would be things like the Molly and Wally puppet. Your input might be a parenting class. Your outputs might be 32 people have completed this program. What other kind of things are in a logic model?
Are there goals and objectives?
Mm-hmm. Funky. Every logic model and every funder names things a little bit differently.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's going to be a what do you want to happen?
Outcomes or
Yeah. What do we want the picture to look like at the end? Then
Mhm.
another feature is that there's going to be the what does it look like now? So what do we think the most important thing about a logic model is? Like if you wrote a logic model and then you went and won the lottery and moved to Hawaii, what would other people need to know looking at it?
Like understanding the program, I guess.
Okay. Understanding,
What is expected?
okay. Okay. Yeah. So let's look at our answers and see what might fit into that. Is it that they try out multiple strategies? Is that what you do with a logic model? No. Do they enhance community involvement? Not a logic model. And this is where you have to really just read what the question is asking. This is hard for us sometimes because we want to put so much into it. Help determine appropriate staffing problems, patterns. I mean, it could, but is that the most important feature? Connect your outcomes and your goals. Because like Shannon said, if somebody doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing and understand how they're supposed to get there, then how are they going to be able to use that logic model? So the answer is D for that one. Exactly. So another way to look at it is a logic model is a picture of how things are supposed to work. So while you might look at it and say, oh, well, the activity says that we need to run 30 incredible years groups, so we know we need at least, enough staff to do that. That's reading too much into this. We just want the overall most important feature. All right, let's try one more. And this one, I've seen a lot in practice questions. Archival data is, so that's why I went through what all those different things about archival data. So archival data, as it was said earlier, is stuff that we can find in reports and libraries in the musty, dusty parts of agencies. So we got information from a large number of individuals. Is it? Here's one of the things where it could be, but not necessarily. Is it agency compiled information? Stephanie, I love that look because that's exactly the look you should have for this answer. Maybe. Let's see what else is out there. Is it hard to find? Some of it might be, but all of it. So just like with A, some of it might be, but not all of it. And collected from surveys. Some of it might be, but not all of it. So while A, C, and D might be archival data, it's not all archival data, because some archival data may be just stories from one or two people. Or it might be, on posters around the office, so it's easy to find. Or it might be, data from the hospital, so that's not a survey. So the only one that is always true is that archival data is collected and gotten together by people in an agency. It's a funky question. I know. Questions on this one? All right. So we did have probably my largest group ever to do a Kahoot. 7 of you did it. Amaria, who is not here, had the highest points, so she will have a little something. But Shannon got the most right. You just weren't as quick as she was, so you were very close on points. So I'm actually going to do 2 prizes this time, because you guys were really close on points, and the fact that she was faster shouldn't negate that you got more answers correct. So there'll be 2 little prizes coming. In fact, I think is it? No, I got it. Never mind. I will give another one, and if you guys want to do it, you can. Again, you don't have to, but I'll put another one in the email to go out. Don't forget about the cram if you like that kind of thing. Don't forget about the the other types of resources there. I wanted to show you also, because some of the resources were not available by email or being on the internet. So what I've also done, and give you this link. I'll put it in the email afterwards too, but this is where you can get some of the other documents that are used in the test. Some of these are a little bit more difficult to find, but I at least wanted to give you links. Some of them are not cheap. Where's the one? I guess it's somewhere else. It's like 120 bucks. Yeah, that's what happened. But if you wanted to get them, the other list I will also give you is this one. This is just one that Honey Bell Bay, if you know her, she and I put this together. Has some books on here, has some things that you might use. These two, I listened to both of those. If you ever work with adults in particular, that whole mommy sippy cup with wine in it thing, these two books were perfect about that. Oh, this is the one that's $121. So this used to be big one in the field. It's a little older now, but so I'll give you this too if you want. I don't get anything, it's not like this is sponsored or anything. But I just wanted to give you those resources as well. So next week will be, and again, I will send you the link to it. But it's the implementation primer, or the planning, the implementation, and then evaluation. And then also, if you have a chance, read chapter 6 in this book. It's the one about community organization. Questions about any of that? Please let me know if there's any support I can give you, whether it's, figuring out your grid or any of that. In fact, I'm going to that is my calendar app. If you want to make an appointment, chat about any of this. So Stephanie, hopefully you should have, like this morning, I resent the what do you call it? Confirmation email. So it should have been at the top of your email. Let me see. Okay, maybe you didn't have it signed in before, because I see you just signed in this morning. Yeah. So that's okay. You will get a reminder again next Monday. I just try to do that in the morning so that if you're like me and you've got 50 million emails, it's at the top. All right. Any other questions? Great. Shannon, why don't you just hold on for a second? We can chat for just a minute. All right, let me